Hi, I'm Bryan from the law firm of Tobias and Comer Law, and I'm joined today by a very special guest, Courtney Thomson from USA Children's and Women's Hospital. Courtney, tell us what you do at Children's and Women's.
So I'm the NICU parent educator, but I also help with a lot of car seat installations and making sure that they're in safe, as well as the child in the seat safe. So we definitely want to make sure that everybody's safe on the road.
Excellent. Yeah, well, and we appreciate you coming here today and talking with us about car seats. This is something that is very near and dear to my heart. I have a 6-year-old and almost 2-year-old, and so, you know, anytime we've got caregivers or whomever, parents or grandparents, you always want to make sure that the car seats are safe and safely installed. So let's kind of walk through what it is that people need to be thinking of when they do think car seats.
Yep.
And so what's the very first thing somebody comes to you and says, hey, I've got a child, I've got a baby, what's the first thing a parent needs to do for the car seat?
So the first thing is just knowing if they're in the right seat. So what is their age, what is their weight, their height, and you can always refer to the car seat manual. That's the Bible of the seat, so we need to be looking at that. And you can even look on the side of the seat. One side's in English, one side's in Spanish, to let you know the height and weight of the seat. So that's going to be step number one. You want to make sure they're in the correct seat. And when you place the child in there, you need to make sure that they have at least 1.5 inches between the top part of their head to the top shell of the seat. So a lot of people put their kids in seats that aren't even sized correctly for them. So that, we want to make sure, number one, they're in the right seat. And then you can put them in the seat, and we want to make sure that that's correct too. So this is a convertible seat that could be rear facing or forward facing. So we want to make sure that the strap placement's right, the retainer clip is in the right spot, and that it's actually tight enough.
Sure, and you touched on a good point there. I know that there's a lot of confusion sometimes. When is it that the child's supposed to be rear facing versus when is it that we're supposed to turn the child forward facing, as they inevitably want to do when they start getting mobile and can talk?
We want to definitely be rear facing for at least 2 years. That's real important. So the car seat is made for the crash to protect the child, and definitely rear facing is going to help protect the child the most, because the biggest part on a baby or even a child is their head. So when they're forward facing in an accident, their head is going to travel further faster and can get injured. So rear facing is going to really cradle their head and be in the safest position to protect the head and the neck column.
Sure, and then that way if they are rear-ended, then their head's going to be supported by the back of the seat as opposed to going forward. And you know, you touch on a good point there too. If you have been involved in an automobile accident with a child in a car seat, or even if the child's not in the car seat, but if the seat has been in a wreck, don't use the car seat again. Even if it was a low-speed impact, you want to make sure that you got a brand new car seat and get it replaced, right?
Yes, something might be internally warped. You never know. If you've been in a crash, definitely get a new seat. The manufacturer will tell you that.
Sure.
So always know the history of your seat too. Was it in an accident? How old is it? Because car seats expire, and a lot of people don't realize that too, that it's usually a 6 or 7 year limit on them.
Right, absolutely. And so kind of on that same line then, I've always heard and tell folks, never use a recycled car seat. If an aunt or a grandmother or a cousin or neighbor, whoever says, hey, well, I've got another car seat, you know, you can use it, always a good idea just to go get a new one, right?
If possible, yes. And I always get the question, well, what is the best seat? Well, I always say the one you can afford, okay? Because they all pass the same federal safety standards, whether they're $50 or $250. So whatever you can afford, and you want to make sure that they're in there properly, but that the seat is in the car properly. So it's a 2-step process, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great point, because otherwise you're just essentially strapping them into a missile if it's not properly attached. Walk us through kind of what it is that you're looking for to make sure that a car seat's installed properly, whether it's forward facing or rear facing.
So you want to make sure that you're taking the right belt path. So with the convertible, you're going to have 2 belt paths, a rear facing and a forward facing. So if you're forward facing, you're definitely going to be taking this one right here. In addition to the belt, you want to make sure that you're using what we call a top tether, which is what this is up here, okay? And this is going to be attached to an anchor point in a car. It might be on the back dash of a sedan. It could be on the bottom part of a bucket seat in a van or an SUV. So that's why they're really long, because the anchor points are in different areas in the car, but it's important to research with your car manual where those anchor points are. So this is one of the most miscommonly things that people miss. They do the strap with the seatbelt, but they don't use the top tether. And in crashes, it's really going to hold this top part of the seat back to help prevent that head injury from hitting the seat in front of them.
Gotcha.
So that's a big step with the forward facing.
Now, on some of these, and this is our son's, we don't have the clips on it, but sometimes you can buckle into the anchor points at the bottom, or where the top of the seat meets the bottom of the seat. But I get this question sometimes: is it better to have it and the seat belt?
No, so you only want to use one, not both. And that's another reason to refer to your car manual, because sometimes the lower anchors have a weight limit, sometimes 65 pounds. The seatbelt doesn't have a weight limit. So the older your child gets, I say it's probably safer to just go ahead and use the seatbelt instead of the lower anchors, so you don't have to worry about that weight limit.
Sure.
So that's important to look at too, but I get that a lot. And I would think the same thing, being extra careful doing both, but it can work against each other in an accident. So just use one or the other, not both.
Okay, and so then if you are going to use the seatbelt, I presume you got to make sure that sucker's super tight to make sure that the seat's not going to move. Is that right?
Right, definitely. So that's another step that people forget. You have to usually pull that shoulder strap all the way out and feed it back. You'll hear a little clicking sound, and that means it's locking. So you definitely want to pull it back as tight as you can. And right here at the belt path, you don't want it to move more than an inch. Okay, so that's how you're going to check for tightness. If you can move it, you've got to tighten it up some more. So having it in there tight is real important, and then having the child properly in the seat is important.
Sure. Now let's talk about that. So if we're putting our child in the seat, I know that this clip here is one of the more important pieces, and it's all important, but where should this go on the child's chest?
So it needs to go right over the collarbone. So we say armpit level, because in an accident, those bones are going to absorb the crash forces. And because if it's down here, it's going to lacerate a liver, do some internal organ damage. So we definitely want it on the strongest part of the baby's bones, which is going to be the clavicle area. Okay. So right at armpit level, and then these straps, if you're forward facing, need to be at or above the baby's shoulder. Okay. If you're rear facing, they need to be at or below the baby's shoulder. Okay. So that's a difference too. That's going to help protect them in that head-on collision. And then a pinch test, you can do that by just pinching up an inch right at their shoulder. If you can pinch up an inch, we say tighten it up. So usually you're just going to pull that to tighten it. If you need to loosen it, there's usually a button right above that little pull string where you pull at the same time, and it's going to loosen it. So that's a way to kind of get it tightened and loosened if you need to. And then you definitely want to make sure you've got the crotch buckle at the position that's closest to them with comfort. Sure. And move it out as needed as they grow. And these are real nice because you can just pull on it and kind of lift it up and down to help move those straps where they need to be. So they're making it a lot easier. Like this nice seat right here, it's real convenient to be able to do that versus going on the back and unstrapping everything. So we're getting, with technology, a lot of features like that, and we're starting to see more seats now that can swivel to the side for convenience. So there's all types that are hitting the market, but it's real important to get it checked out by a certified technician. Okay, absolutely. A lot of people out there feel like they know what they're doing, but a certified technician has been in training for this. They know what's right, what's wrong, and they'll also check it for any kind of a recall.
Okay.
As well.
And you touched on a good point just a second ago with the pinch test. I know that as my daughter's gotten older, she says, well, can we loosen it up a little bit? And so that's a good way to make sure that it is tight, because again, if it's loose, it's not really doing the child any good. So just to make sure that you can't get that an inch or so is a good way to do that. Well, as the child continues to grow, the car seats change, right? And so take us through that. When is it that we should progress past a seat like this to the next step, and then ultimately the booster, and finally sitting in the seat
Definitely. So with this, it's a convertible. This is probably the next step after the infant carrier. It can be rear facing or forward. So with rear facing, you can adjust the level so that they're more at like a 45-degree angle, and you can use the lower anchors or the seat belt through that rear facing belt path. So after age 2, nothing says at age 2 you have to turn them around. You know, you can stay rear facing as long as possible, even after age 2, that's great. And then when you do turn them around, you're gonna be more upright, and you can do that with this seat. And then the straps at or above the shoulder, and we talked about the snugness and the tightness by the pinch test. So we're gonna stay forward facing in the 5-point harness as long as possible, and then they can progress to the booster seat usually when they're closer to age 4 or 40 pounds.
Okay.
And also mature enough to stay strapped in.
Sure.
So that's a big one. So nothing says you can't just leave them in this 5-point harness for even after age 4 and then progress into the booster where you're just using the seat belt, because you want to mature enough to stay buckled and, you know, stay in the seat. So that's real important.
Yeah, and and that's something that I didn't really think about in terms of where the belts or straps are hitting them, and that's what's really the important thing here. We don't want the strap to hit them in the liver if they get into a wreck, or we want it on the strongest, most supported bones that they have, right?
That's right. That's going to absorb the crash forces and really, decrease injury risks. So that's real important. So staying in the booster seat is really a commonly misused stage. So we say, usually ages 8 to 12, they can start to come out of them, but really when they're about 4 feet 9 inches tall. And you can check by if they can sit in the back seat and touch the floorboard with their flat feet, they don't need the booster anymore. It's kind of a good rule of thumb, just so they have the proper placement over the bones, like you just said, to protect in a crash. So the booster seat is real important, and that's really, one of the leading causes of death in that age group when they're not in it. So it's real important to don't skip the booster stage.
Absolutely, don't skip the booster, and even if they do progress out of it, you still want to keep them in the back seat till what age?
13.
Okay,
That's a hard one.
That's a hard one.
Yes.
Courtney, it's so important to make sure that the car seats are installed properly, and so we're really excited to be able to partner with USA Children's and Women's Hospital to provide a free car seat inspection. Tell us about that.
So Friday, September 23rd, across the street from the hospital at the Strada Center, we're going to be providing free checks, make sure that the child is in the appropriate seat and that it's installed in the car correctly. So we'll have about 10 technicians on staff to do it. It flows very smoothly, so come on out and get it checked out, and you'll be glad you did.
All right, excellent. There you go. So September 23rd, noon to 3, across the street from Children's and Women's Hospital. Courtney, thank you. And if you need more information, you can check us out at tobiascomerlaw.com.